It's v.h.s.x. What do you mean?
Alright everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're reacting to a video, CocoCava. I'm hoping that's how you pronounce it. It's the title is Dead by Daylight's Just Leave Problem. And as you guys know, this is definitely touching on more Survivor Toxicity. I wanted to dive into the topic and kind of give my perspective on it, sort of hear another perspective as there is the Survivor perspective. So I'm going to allow the video to at least explain what is the Just Leave problem, and then we'll dive into the topic.
Exactly is the Just Leave problem? At its core, it's when survivors hang around and open exit gate when there's no strategic reason to. The match is over, they've won, but instead of escaping and moving on, they wait. This usually involves taunts like teabagging, that infamous rapid crouching, I'm sure you can understand where the name comes from, or frantic flashlight clicking. For many killers, this feels like more than just a delay, it feels like being held hostage. It's seen as a deliberate act of disrespect, meant to gloat and drag out the killer's defeat. A killer who just slogged through a tough, stressful match is now forced to either walk to the gate and get a face full of their opponent's celebration, or just stand somewhere else on the map while the in-game collapse timer slowly ticks down.
Yeah, that is pretty much the best way I would describe it, and that is the main issue that I think a lot of people have when encountering Survivor teams. Probably this is also the root of where killer anxiety comes from. Having to deal with that outcome doesn't feel good. Now, on the same side of the coin, because I know that there will be people that may disagree and just say, oh, it's just a video game, who cares? These are the same people that are, when they are getting hit on hook, not like killer says no, when they knock them down or something like that, get bagged by the killer if you're playing Ghostface or Trapper, the Trapper bags, or the hag bags, which is, I think, a more unique BM that I don't think is really used much, but the people use a lot of the WS. But anyway, the point is that those people that do that will then complain if the killer does the same thing to them. And I think that's sort of like where the root of the issue kind of comes from. And I think a lot of the toxicity usually comes from like this sort of concept of the chicken or the egg, like who was more toxic first. But obviously I think it's just an endless cycle where the side is responding to the other side, and then they're toxic again and again. Now, in my perspective, I would imagine that survivors objectively are going to be more toxic first, because they probably will disagree with the hit you've gotten. They maybe disagree with how you play. They may disagree, but like the add-on, like you can just exist casually as a killer, and then they'll just disagree with your existence in general, and then try to BM. So, with that being said, however, these are the same people that complain when the killer does the same thing. They're usually very upset when they go down. They're usually very, very angry and very burnt out. So obviously, speaking for my killer players out there, I'm pretty sure you guys are no stranger to the Just Leave problem. Because of the mere fact that, you're probably going to find people that do that. They'll camp hatch, they'll camp gate, they'll camp this, you know what I mean? Just to be like, oh, I left. And it's like, okay, congratulations. Like, move on to your next game, bro. So it's an experience that I think a lot of killers can really say, all in agreement can say that it is really unnecessary in a lot of ways. Especially when it was a tough game, especially when it was simply just like, maybe you're just even learning a killer. Like, you could just be brand new at Vecna, or brand new at Drac, or brand new with Hillbilly of all killers, right? Like, you could be brand new with any killer, and you'll probably see the same thing, and it probably doesn't really give you the incentive to want to try again. And I think that is just unfortunately due to just the DBD community. Survivor toxicity in general really is very prevalent. Which I've covered this in a previous video, which I'll probably link at the end, covering just like the frequency of toxic Survivor players is definitely very high in comparison to the toxicity of killers. Now, obviously, we do need to take into account that there is a negativity bias. Like, we're going to objectively as humans just remember a negative experience a lot quicker than we're going to remember a positive one, and that's just how it is. But for the few that really do conduct the test, for the few that do conduct the experiment to really see how toxic they can be, which shout out to DeBrownie, if for some reason he's watching this. Shout out to you, because you actually did conduct a test, and I'm gonna go ahead and link my video covering that and my perspective on it at the end. But specifically, this is definitely one of those reasons, right? And it's not necessarily that it's the teabagging that's really toxic. It's not necessarily that like an in-game action is really that crazy. But it's just sort of the intention behind it, I think, that's what really rubs people the wrong way. Because you're deliberately trying to sort of like rub your opponent's face in it when it's really just kind of unnecessary. And that probably is applicable to both sides. But I just think it's more frequent on Survivor. That's why I'm kind of leaning more to kind of point it at that. But either way, it's really just kind of unnecessary. Like, I think that if you are, good at the game, or if you are, steamrolling in some kind of way, I think your skill kind of speaks for itself. So I personally don't really think it's necessary. And I lean into that sort of perspective where, like, I would just allow my own skill, allow my own ability to do very well with a low tier character to be my statement, and to be like, yeah, I won with this guy, GG, like, and that in itself, or like landing really good shots with Pyramid Head, for example, or whatever have you. Or even back then, pre-rework Freddy was the same thing. It's like, I won with the weakest killer in the game, like, and that in itself, I think, was a statement. But even besides that, I think that a simple GG and you move on with your game is perfectly fine. I don't really think it's necessary to do all of that, but I really want to hear the Survivor perspective here in this portion of the video.
To really get the just leave problem, we have to step into the muddy boots of the survivors who wait. Their reasons aren't always as simple as wanting to be toxic, though let's be real, that's often a big part of it. First, and most obviously, there is pure, unfiltered taunting. For some, it's a victory lap. After a match of being chased, hooked, and on the defensive, turning the tables to mock the once unstoppable killer gives them a feeling of dominance. It's their way of rubbing the victory in the killer's face, a final show of power before they vanish. This is especially common if the survivor felt like the killer played dirty, maybe they were camped or tunneled, and the teabag at the gate is their form of payback. It's their way of saying, you tried, but I still beat you. However, there's also a more strategic, even altruistic side to staying. A healthy survivor will often wait at the exit gate to make sure their teammates get out safely. They become a lookout or a bodyguard. If another survivor is injured and being chased, the person at the gate can run back in to take a protection hit, trading their own health to secure a friend's escape. These are clutch, game-winning plays that can turn a potential sacrifice into a full team escape. In those moments, staying isn't just about ego, it's about teamwork. Sometimes, it's just about creating a distraction. If one gate is open and the killer is close, a survivor might make a lot of noise to draw the killer's attention, giving their teammates on the other side of the map precious seconds to open the second gate. Here, the taunting isn't just for show, it's a calculated risk to pull the killer's focus. And finally, there's a small group of players who wait to give the killer one last hit for extra blood points, seeing it as a nice gesture after a good match. The intent might be positive, but it looks identical to taunting, and many killers will take it that way, which just shows how messy communication can be in Dead by Daylight. For all of our lovely...
I do agree with the statements really being said here. I completely agree with it. I think that is exactly all the reasons that it does happen. I think it's predominantly more so toxic, I would say. That's usually where they're at, because after they do that, the end game chat usually is followed with some form of taunting or something like that. And obviously there are strategic reasons to stay in the match, because like it was stated, you want to body block for them. You want to make sure that they can escape as well. You can bodyguard, whatever have you. Try to draw the attention of the killer. And I think that those are just as valid. But, when people are looking back on the experience, that's not really what comes to mind. They're not really thinking of the strategic advantage. They're really just thinking like, this was wildly unnecessary for everybody to stand here and click and bag and lose their minds when they're already in the gate. Everyone's already safe. You can just walk out the match and move on, right? And that, to me, I think makes a lot more sense when it comes down to when people talk about the just leave problem, because I don't think playing strategically is the problem at all. Like, that's because that's not really the issue. It's more so an issue on the survivor's end, because if a killer is playing strategically, they immediately will throw a tantrum. But if we're talking about the just in general with strategy, that's in the game, that's how it works, and that's how it is. And I think a lot of killer players are fully aware of that. Unfortunately, a lot of survivor mains, I don't think, at least from what I'm seeing from the vast majority of people talking about it, are really unaware on how strategy works on the killer end. And that's why the sort of the camping and tunneling and slugging conversations come from, because either A, they actively don't understand why it's being done and they just think it's just being toxic, and killers are magically gain some kind of like buff where they, if they don't tunnel, there's all this macro gameplay will suddenly spawn into their brains, and they'll be able to instantly down people and somehow create this incredible automatic win just by not utilizing strategy, when it simply just does not exist. So that's really the perspective that we're kind of standing at when it comes down to this. And I do think it's just a symptom of the community just overall just being very toxic in a lot of ways. And I think that's just how it goes. So let's go ahead and jump over to what the great debate is.
So why does this one issue cause such a huge reaction? Because it's about the core power dynamic of Dead by Daylight. For most of the match, survivors are the prey, constantly in fear of a killer who can down them in seconds. While that can be debated, and many players will say the survivors are the power role, I'm not here to debate that today. But the very end of the game is one of the few times that the normal dynamic completely flips. At an open exit gate, a survivor is effectively invincible. They hold all the power. They decide when the game ends. That final taunt is a release of all the tension they've felt, a final roar of defiance from a position of total safety. This whole debate is just a small snapshot of the larger tribalism in the game, survivor versus killer. Each side feels misunderstood and often attacked by the other. Killers complain about toxic swifts, while survivors point to tunneling and camping killers. The just leave problem is one.
I do want to quickly touch on this. This has nothing to really do with what's being stated per se, but more so just like something that I've noticed when it comes down to people talking about their frustrations with the game. I find it very interesting that on both ends, strategy is the issue. So, for example, like people don't like swifts because it's overly strategic, like to the point that you can't really counter a lot of what is being done because they have communication. So the element of surprises is gone, which can really reduce a lot of the capabilities that a killer can kind of pull off, because if you know where they are, you know what's going to happen, you can easily plan ahead before they even make their play. And on the other side of things is survivor as well. They complain that killers are using strategies like camping, tunneling, and slugging in order to be able to gain advantages, to slow the game down and be able to pull the game back and stuff like that. And I noticed like obviously this is a completely different point from the video, but I noticed that strategy is the biggest problem that people have. Like, I don't know if it's because there's a lot of hyper casual players in this game, and then like when they see anything strategic, they just kind of crash out. But I think that's just sort of a part of the game, at least from my perspective. Like, that's just how it works, and that just goes for both sides of the spectrum here. Like, both sides are utilizing strategies in different ways. Now, if one side has just utilizes their strategies better, of course they're just going to win the match. But for some reason, it's automatically turned into, oh, you're just being toxic. And I think that might be applicable to both ends too. But yeah, that was a little tidbit I wanted to drop.
The ground zeros for this conflict, a flashpoint where all the frustrations collide. The developers at Behavior Interactive are clearly aware of this frustration. We've seen them introduce quality of life updates aimed at smoothing over the game's roughest edges. One of the examples we discussed earlier, introducing the abandoned match option for survivors when an entire team is slugged, preventing a killer from leaving everyone to bleed out indefinitely. While these changes address some of the symptoms of the game being held hostage, they haven't erased the core players' behaviors that cause friction in the first place. When you boil it all down, the just leave problem is and is not so much more than a few survivors wasting time. It's a tangled web of player psychology, game design, and a community culture that's deeply divided. It's about the thrill of victory and the sting of defeat. It's about altruism and ego, strategy and spite. For a survivor, waiting at the gate can be a moment of empowerment, a team-saving play, or just a bit of gloating. For a killer, it's a source of immense frustration, the feeling of being held hostage and, just maybe, a golden opportunity for a spectacular last-second punishment. Is there an easy fix? Probably not. This behavior is practically part of the game's DNA now, as baked in as generators and hooks. It's a perfect storm of emotions and a game literally designed to provoke them.
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of agree with that statement. It's sort of baked into the DNA, but like I've said many a time, I think it's just because both sides are trying to play strategically, and then one side will just disagree with the fact that they're playing strategically. They just consider it toxic for whatever reason that doesn't make any sense. And my sort of theory, I guess, is just the fact that strategy is even there in a game that people argue over if it's a casual game or if it's a competitive game, and that's its own topic for its own video. But basically, yeah, I mean, I think it kind of boils down to it. The Just Leave, like, really can be toxic in its own way when it's the specific scenario that they are completely safe and they're teabagging and clicking and losing their minds. It's just unnecessary. However, if they are playing strategically, where they're waiting it out to try to get a body block, that's a strategy. That shouldn't even be a problem. Like, that shouldn't even be considered toxic by any means. The same way that tunneling, camping, slugging should not be considered toxic at all, considering it is a strategy. Now, when used in ways to cause some type of frustration, or specifically to throw their games in order to do X, Y, and Z, right? Which is, once again, its own situation, its own specific scenario, then obviously that in itself can be considered toxic as well. But just in the same way that people will wait by the gate to body block somebody strategically is the same way that people will tunnel, slug, or camp in order to gain an advantage. It works the same way. You're trying to secure a kill, or, you know, trying to gain an advantage and pull people off of gens with those strategies, the same way that they're trying to do with the Just Leave mechanic. So, well, not Just Leave mechanic, but you get the idea. Point is, all right, is essentially that. So let me know what you guys think in the comments section while you're down there. Check out the original video linked in the description. Consider supporting the channel with the links. We'll consider becoming a member on YouTube for exclusive content, and consider joining the Patreon for the same. We also have a TikTok and Twitch to follow if you want to do that for more to watch me play Kill Alive on Twitch and YouTube. But that is the end of the video for you guys. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube things for me. Consider checking out the original video linked in the description. Check out those links to support the channel. Consider following on TikTok and Twitch to watch me play Kill Alive, and subscribing as well for more content like this. And I will see you guys in the next one.